Have you ever spent the majority of a sprint planning meeting discussing the subtle differences between 2, 3, and 5 story points? How regularly do you find yourself debating the merits of the as I want, so that format for writing stories with your developers? Has management ever come down and tried to set some kind of ideal sprint length or velocity for all your teams? And how often has management's idea of what success looked like actually matched yours? Have you ever been told by a partner team that they can't work on your request because they're already booked up for the next 6 sprints? How often do your team stand-ups turn into justifying my paycheck sessions? Do you find that your stories and tasks roll over from sprint to sprint with the only justification being, I'm still working on that? What percentage of the work in your sprints or on your Kanban board is just filler or a bunch of mindless tasks? How comfortable would you feel letting a peer from another team or maybe your boss's boss go dig around in your backlog right now with no prep on your part? When was the last time that you had a retro where you discussed how you worked, not just what you did or didn't get done? Well, these are all classic symptoms of teams and orgs caught in the quagmire of agile orthodoxy. It's a purgatory where we play act at agile without ever really succeeding or failing with it. We go through the motions without understanding their meaning. It's agile in name only. Hi, I'm Ryan Crow. I'm a senior product manager at Atlassian. Today, we're going to consider the phenomenon of agile in name only. How we fall into it, how we might get out of it. We're going to do that by stripping away all that we get wrong about agile. We're going to dig into its roots, learn its history, discover the driving philosophy of agility. We'll talk about some practical actions you can take that will enhance your practice of agile, and I even got a take-home challenge for you. So, come along with me. We'll explore what we get wrong about agile. Here's the track. Our team is capital A, Agile. We know Agile is good, and we're demonstrably doing Agile. We're following all those practices that we learned about in that 2-day seminar all the leads went to a couple years ago. So this must be the way things are supposed to be. We're not struggling, we're agiling. As Voltaire might quip, in this best of all possible worlds, Agile is the best methodology for business success. And though I might not see its value, and you might not see its value, and we might not know anyone in our company who can describe its value, it must have value, because we've heard other companies have had success with it, and we know they're good, and what they're doing is good, and what they're doing is agile. Therefore, if they're doing good, then doing agile must be good, and it must be so in this best of all possible worlds. Here's the thing. Agile isn't a do. Agile is a be. Agile is a philosophy, not an orthodoxy. We often replace mindset with methodology. The core of Agile is agility. According to the Agile Alliance, which was founded by some of the original authors of the Agile Manifesto, the term Agile was chosen as a label because it represented the adaptiveness and response to change that was so important to this new approach to software development. So our benchmark for Agile success should be how we've adapted to change, how we've learned, how we've grown. Yet we often seek to demonstrate agility through our adherence to a set of rules and processes. Think about how backwards that is. We've warped Agile from a change agent to a tool of conformity. And it's easy to see how we got to this point. Folks on the ground floor of Agile were responding to a very specific set of forces and trends in their field, software development. Agile grew in popularity at the same time as tech startups and disruptors became the big thing. And often, those groups were being staffed by those same Agile pioneers. Those startups were successful, and other companies started taking notice. They see, hey, they're doing this Agile thing. We want to replicate it. The problem is, they miss the fundamental element driving that Agile success. Change. Change and the ability to adapt, those are table stakes for Agile. And that change has to take place throughout a company. Right? More often than not, it requires transformation. Right? Like a software development sort of framework, right? You imagine it's like going from selling boxed copies of your software at Circuit City to being an always online SaaS provider, right? It's that kind of a transformation. Yet we often treat it like implementing a new filing system, right? Something we can just drop in and forget about. We act like it's just a little something we can slip in an announcement at the end of an all-hands meeting, like, oh, by the way, we're doing Agile now, so from now on, make sure you're doing Scrum. Boom, we're all Agile, and we're all going to profit. That is Agile in name only. Right? We adopt the trappings, ceremony, the lexicon of Agile, but we don't actually change the way we work. We don't reflect. We don't examine. We don't pivot. We don't optimize. We don't challenge ourselves. So, of course, we're not going to realize any of the benefits of Agile that we sought out to achieve. 3 reasons why that matters. First, all the work you put into implementing Agile is wasted effort. Worse, you probably actually lowered your company's productivity because everybody had to spend a bunch of time learning all these new processes that didn't actually make them any more effective. And that's not to mention all the kvetching back in the bullpen about all these shenanigans and hoops management is making us jump through. Second, you've soured everyone on Agile. Now, if you believe there's value in Agile and you want to work towards finding that Agile, you're going to have a much harder time trying to course correct now in the future because all your people, they don't see the value of Agile now, so why should they believe there's any value in it at all? Third, your competitors have figured it out. They're doing it correctly. They're seeing the benefits. It may not be true now, but it will be. Especially if you're not going after it. Now, to be clear, you don't have to be Agile to be successful, right? If you found another way to be more adaptive and responsive, that's wonderful. Power to you. Share your thoughts and your learnings. Love to hear about it. But if you're still working the way you were 10, 20, 30 years ago, it's only a matter of time before someone comes along who can figure out how to do what you're doing today faster, more efficiently, and more effectively. So, how do we avoid implementing Agile in name only? And how do we get out of it if we're already in it? Well, I'll say it again. Agile is a philosophy, not an orthodoxy. It's a mindset, not a methodology. If we don't understand the why behind the how, and if we miss the forest of the purpose through the trees of procedure, we can't realize the benefits of Agile. But if we do understand the why, and we learn how to learn, and we embrace change and accept its discomfort, empower ourselves, teams, and our companies to change, then we can truly see an Agile transformation. what is the philosophy of Agile? Well, most would say that agility is creating and responding to change. And I would agree with that. I think that's correct. In fact, I would actually clarify it further to simply adaptation. Agility is adaptation. It's our ability to adapt that makes us successful, right? Think about natural selection and survival of the fittest, right? Remember, what was observed there was not the most physically fit organisms excelling, but those that fit best. Those that were best able to adapt to their immediate local environments. So too in business. Those best able to adapt to their changing environments will find the most success. But I want to take it further. I want to get more philosophical. I want to get at the heart of what makes this adaptation possible, and ideally successful. Because unlike those organisms Darwin was observing, your business doesn't have millions of years to create trillions of iterations, each with slight variations, with each version becoming a better fit. No, you're one of those iterations now, so you have to adapt now, not some future version of you across thousands of generations. We can't all be prehistoric fish swimming around the primordial sea being like, hey, look at Ricky and his one weird fin. And then, Ricky's great times 1,000 grandson uses his 4 weird fins to get up and walk out onto land. No, we have got to start growing some legs and some lungs right now. We got to get to breathing and walking. We can't wait for the mindlessness of random evolution, right? We have to proactively and intelligently evolve ourselves. So how do we do that? How can we make sure that we're adapting effectively? How can we know if we're changing for the best? By learning. Learning is the philosophical heart of Agile. How we learn, how we recognize learning, how we celebrate it, how we promote it. How we value learning determines our success with Agile. Let's be honest. Change is scary. And the reason change is scary is because it's uncertain. And look, we can spend tons of effort trying to minimize that uncertainty, but we can never fully eliminate it. Agile certainly isn't going to help you fully eliminate it, but what it can do is help you learn if your change was successful. And if it was, you can learn why it was successful and how to repeat that success. And if it wasn't, it can help you learn why it wasn't and how to avoid making that same mistake next time. It's that cycle that's key to Agile, right? Learning and adapting. Learning and adapting. The heart of Agile is learning and adapting. Another way I like to think about it is the output of Agile is learning. The outcome is adaptation. To carry on our Darwinian theme, what I'm describing is essentially the scientific method, right? We hypothesize, experiment, observe, and conclude. As a pro tip, if you're ever trying to convince some Agile skeptics, compare it to the scientific method. Right? Well, I don't know about this whole Agile thing, but you really going to question the scientific method? At its core, science is the scientific method. Chemistry, physics, biology, those aren't the definition of science, right? They are practical applications of the scientific method to a particular area of study. And each have their own rules and practices that make them more efficient at discovery and sharing within their discipline, but at their heart, they're practicing the scientific method. As the scientific method is the cornerstone for science, Agile too has its own foundational principle, the Agile Manifesto. Just as chemistry, physics, biology are applications of the scientific method, Agile methodologies like Scrum, Kanban, SAFe are not the definition of Agile. They're specific applications of the Agile Manifesto tailored to meet specific needs in specific situations. Now, I'm not disparaging those Agile methodologies. I love them, and they can be extremely helpful in finding Agile success. But they're all downstream of the Agile Manifesto. They build on the Agile Manifesto. That's why they can be so helpful, because they provide some direct routes to practically applying the principles of Agile based on years of practice and study of what works well. But you have to understand what they're built on, right? The Agile Manifesto, in order to execute them successfully. Otherwise, you risk misunderstanding what those methodologies are trying to help you accomplish, right? They're a means to an end. If you don't understand the end you're driving towards, you risk getting stuck in the weeds of the means. It's sort of, you have to understand the rules in order to break the rules kind of thing. One of the biggest red flags for teams running Agile in name only is asking them to explain what Agile is and having them describe back to you the activities of Scrum or Kanban. Often what you'll find is that those teams, they've never read or discussed the Agile Manifesto. Their entire focus has been on implementing a methodology. That's why it's absolutely critical to read and understand the Agile Manifesto to avoid Agile in name only. You can't be a scientist without understanding the scientific method. And you can't be Agile without understanding the Agile Manifesto. Now, why is it so important to understand the Agile Manifesto specifically? Well, because it reveals the philosophical heart of Agile, right? Learning. If you want to understand why learning is so crucial to Agile success, read the Agile Manifesto. So, my biggest piece of advice to all of you is read the Agile Manifesto. In fact, what am I saying? Let's read it right now together. I always recommend reading the Agile Manifesto on its original webpage. I love it. It's a glorious shrine to Web 1.0 design aesthetics. It grounds the Agile Manifesto in historical context, which adds a kind of intellectual, stands the test of time weight to it. A digital Dead Sea Scroll, if you will. So, let's read it. We are uncovering better ways of developing software by doing it and helping others do it. Through this work, we have come to value individuals and interactions over processes and tools, working software over comprehensive documentation, customer collaboration over contract negotiation, responding to change over following a plan. That is, while there is value in the items on the right, we value the items on the left more. So what's the value of Agile? Well, here's how I describe it. Agile shortens the time between investment and learning, which results in increased value created at lower risk. Let's take a look at a graph. See, in traditional waterfall development, we come up with a plan. We work and we work and we work, and eventually we release a product. Now, if all goes well, the value generated at the end looks like this. But if it doesn't go well and you end up with something like this, well, you're in big trouble because you invested a lot for very little return. Waterfall accommodates for this by putting maximum effort into the planning to try and remove as much risk as possible before work actually starts. Waterfall wants to make sure that before we make that big investment plunge, we'll be executing the plan that is most likely to succeed. But as we discussed earlier, we can't eliminate all risk in a plan. And even if we could, 100% adherence to a plan doesn't ensure success. Why? Because, contrary to what some of our more braggadocious PM colleagues might have you believe, we can't predict the future. Thus, any plan that carries us into the future must be built on at least some assumptions. And the further out into the future that plan takes us, the more assumptions we need to make. And you see, that's the inherent folly of waterfall. See, the more time we spend planning, the longer the whole process takes, and the longer it takes us to get a product out the door. And the further into the future our plan has to take us. And the more assumptions we have to make. So to compensate for that, well, we say, let's make the project bigger so that we get more bang for our buck. But then that takes us even further into the future because it's going to take longer to build a bigger product. And again, we're now making more assumptions. But then the project becomes more complicated and we need more planning. And we're on into the future, and all of a sudden we've invested so much time and effort just into the planning that we hit a sunk cost fallacy, and we can't not deliver something. We've been planning this for so long, we haven't produced anything, so we just keep trudging along into the future, delivering on a plan built on assumptions that by this point may have already been proven wrong. Here's how Agile addresses that same issue. Let's take a look at the graph again. See, we can ship more often by focusing on building working software and cutting the fat out of the building process. Now, every time we ship, we have an opportunity to learn. Were we successful? How can we adapt? How can we build on what we've done or course correct? If every time we ship, we learn more, what if we ship smaller releases even more frequently? Well, then we could really start checking those assumptions. But if we're shipping small and often, we need to make sure we can respond to what we're learning by adjusting and changing. So we need to be flexible, we need to be adaptable, we need to be agile. You see, every time we learn, we have an opportunity to reduce risk because we can adapt to what we've learned. We're no longer working on assumptions, we're working on facts. This graph so far has been representing known value at the time, but let's switch it to something where we look at unknown value or retrospective value. That is to say, theoretically, at the point you were making longer term decisions, right, there was some value inherent in those decisions, whether you knew them or not. So that's what this dotted line represents. The actual value, the actual decisions you're making, even though you don't know that value, and you won't really learn about it until you release. So we can see here how one bad assumption can lead us astray. Right? And the sooner we catch those bad assumptions, the sooner we can correct them, the less they'll cost us. But if we don't catch them for years, right, we can be off track for a long time. And even if we start to make some really excellent headway and really smart decisions, we're still behind the 8 ball because of that bad assumption early that we didn't know we needed to correct. And that's where the theory of waterfall is correct, right? The earlier you find a problem, the cheaper it is to fix. But the reality is you won't find all your problems until your product is in front of customers. So the sooner you get it to them, the better. What you're looking for is opportunities to check your assumptions and learn and adapt. Remember our Agile value play. Agile shortens the time between investment and learning, which results in increased value created at lower risk. So look for those opportunities to learn. I think it's time to transition from theory to praxis. And what better way to do that than with a practical tip lightning round? I'm going to go through a number of ways that can help you focus your Agile activities on learning and adaptation. Now, since this is a lightning round, I'm going to be going through these pretty quickly. But that's the advantage of this being a pre-recorded video presentation. You can pause and go back to them. All right, here we go. Number 1, learn to track learning. Now, we know benchmarking Agile success by demonstrating adherence to rules and processes is a no-go, right? That's Agile in name only. Right? Learning and adaptation, that's what we're after. But learning and adaptation can easily be invisible. And they still require a lot of effort, though. So not being able to see all that work that's going into the learning can make us nervous that nothing's actually happening. And so we slip into overprocessing as a way to compensate for those nerves. So establish with your team and your org how you're going to track and share what you've learned and how you've changed. Number 2. Build in time to learn. We know that learning is important, but it doesn't just happen on its own. You need to actually carve out some time to let that learning happen. Be deliberate with your learning. Don't just assume it's going to happen, make it happen. Number 3, have teamwork retros. More often than not, the retrospectives that we have focus on the work output. Did we get it all done? Right? But what we should really be doing is having teamwork retrospectives. How did we work together? How can we get better at working together? How can we best play as a team? Number 4, embrace a culture of failure. We talked earlier about how important failure can be as a learning tool, but in order to feel comfortable learning from failure, we have to be comfortable admitting to failure. And that's not something that just happens on its own, right? We have to allow for failure to exist because, like it or not, we're going to have failures. And it's up to us to demonstrate that failing is okay if we can also demonstrate what we've learned from it. Number 5, focus on outcomes over outputs. It doesn't matter what you built at the end of the day, it matters whether or not that thing you built was successful, if it made a difference, if it helped our customers, if it created value. Number 6, set expectations, not process. Sort of a practical application of outcomes over outputs, particularly looking at how you can scale Agile, right? Because if you have a bunch of different teams all doing a bunch of different things because they're allowed to adapt and change, how do you keep track of all of that? Especially if you're a manager, you're trying to produce some kind of cross-team reporting, right? Well, the way you do that is by setting expectations of what you are trying to do and why you're trying to do it, right? Say, hey, at the end of every month, I need to produce X report. Or I'm trying to look into ways we can do X thing new because it might free us up to respond to customer need Y. Okay, that's great. Then let those teams that are going to be reporting that information figure out the best way to get that to you. Yeah, there'll probably have to be some back and forth as you iron out the details, but that's okay. Again, that's Agile, that's change, that's adapting. Number 7, respond, don't react. It's going to be lots of opportunities for learning with Agile. We've talked about how great that is, but that doesn't mean every time you get a new piece of information, you need to do a complete 180 and change everything that you were doing before, right? You need to learn to figure out which information is helpful and which information is not, right? That's ultimately up to you. And sometimes you just need to stick with your guns, right? You need to say like, hey, this is something I believe in, I think it's important, and I'm going to continue to pursue it. And that's okay, right? You don't have to react to every new piece of data. Respond, acknowledge it, change if change is appropriate, and keep going. Number 8, methodologies are great, but treat them like the pirate code. More guidelines than rules. Number 9, stop trying to solve your process problems with tools. Look, tools are great. I love tools. But no tool is a panacea. Tools won't just do Agile for you, right? You need to solve your process problems and then bring in tools to help make you more effective. Now, these next few tips are targeted for people specifically at certain points during their Agile journey. So, number 10 is for folks who are new to Agile and just starting out. Start with the Agile Manifesto, right? I've said this a number of times and there's a reason I'm saying it again. Read it with your teams, figure out what it means to you. What are the common things that resonate with your team? That's a bedrock that you can build upon. Don't start with a methodology, start with the Agile Manifesto. Number 11, for teams who are stuck in Agile in name only currently, stop everything you're doing, break everything down to its fundamentals, and then build back up. You're not going to solve these problems by just picking away at the outsides. Number 12 is also for people who are stuck in Agile in name only, and that's get some outside perspective. It can be incredibly enlightening to get some new perspective from somebody who's not blind to the same things that you're blind to. Number 13 is for my Agile pros, the folks out there who think they've got Agile down and are working at peak performance. Share why it's working. It's incredibly important to document the why behind your success because you got to pass it on to the next generation. Finally, number 14, product managers are key to Agile success. You see, Agile is a terrible project management tool, but it's not supposed to be a project management tool. It's supposed to be a product planning tool. So learning and adapting helps us figure out the right product investments to make for the right customers at the right time. If the person at the center of the product can champion Agile and clearly demonstrate its value, then the rest of the team can follow suit. To bring us home, I want to give you all a challenge. This challenge starts today. In the next 2 weeks, have an Agile Manifesto book club with your team. Send them all the Agile Manifesto as a pre-read, then get everybody together, discuss and share. In the meeting, take stock. Guys, what are we doing that's working? What isn't working? What's creating value? What's standing in the way of value? Right? These are the kind of questions and discussions you should have with your team. And that's it. It's that simple. Hey, and if you find success with it, maybe take the book club on the road. Take it to your other working groups, other teams that you may partner with, craft cohorts, right? Other PMs. Take it up your management chain. Spread it throughout your org. Heck, even do it with the whole company. But you don't have to do that. The challenge is just do it with your team. But remember, if you learn something, share. Because sharing what we learn is key to Agile. In closing, I'd like to leave you with these words for your Agile journey. Seek first to understand. Remember, the heart of Agile philosophy is learning. Learning unlocks change. Change allows us to adapt and create value. To learn, we must listen. To our customers, yes, but also to each other. Agile is a transformation. It's a change to embrace change. And change is scary. So listen, learn, and be gentle with each other. Thank you for your time today. Big thank you to Product School for hosting me. If you have any questions, I'll be here answering them in the chat. If you want to hear more from me, you can find me on Twitter at rcrowpm. You can hit me up here on LinkedIn. You can check out my Substack newsletter, Post Meridium. I'm Ryan Crow, and I wish you the best of luck on your Agile journey.